Hey everybody, welcome to Crosswind Church Podcast. We hope this message inspires you to take your next step in your faith journey.
So the last James Bond film was absolute trash. It was so bad. Like, I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to be that guy that spoils movies for y'all because it came out a couple of years ago, and if you've not watched it yet, I should spoil it because it's that bad, but I won't. It is, and I say this as a fan, okay? Like, I don't say this as someone who's like doesn't watch the movies. I love the movies. I'm excited about the new era because the last was so bad. Like, I've never watched it again. Right? For those of you movie people, like, you know how you watch a good movie the first time and you watch it again, it's just a little better because you pick up on things that you missed, things that you didn't hear the first time you heard again, things that you didn't see, little Easter eggs, all that kind of stuff. Like, I refused to watch it again because it was so bad. Like, you don't do the thing that he did at the end. Like, it's just, it's so bad. Anyway, like, it's just, I don't have time to talk about it. It's just so bad. And the more I think about whether it's a movie or it's a book, right? Like, you just like a good ending. Like, I love when something ends well. And when it doesn't, right? When they build up all this hype, like Daniel Craig's last James Bond film, it's going to be da-da, and then it's just poof. It's just terrible way that anyway. You ever felt that way with, like, maybe it's your genre of movies, maybe not, spy thrillers and all that kind of stuff. But, like, whether it's a movie or a book, it's just, you need it to end well, right? You don't need it to, like, kind of end with, like, all these different kinds of, like, questions and, like, why did they do this, that, or the other? Sometimes my TikTok algorithm is more book talk than TikTok, and so these authors and new books and things come out, and so I started reading some books by S.A. Cosby. And his first book that came out several years ago, it was one of those books that ended kind of like, is that it? I was like that. Like, you could have wrote like 50 more pages and, like, you could have, like, told the rest of the character's story, and this would have just been better. And then you read the next book by him, and it was a little bit better. And then I skipped a few years because I went to a bookstore, and, you go into a bookstore, they've got, like, the new ones, like, right there, like, at you, like, here, take my money. And so, like, I just bought the latest one, and the latest book is, like, so much better than all the other ones. And so, like, as a reader, you see these people get better and better and the way they write stories and all the different things. And so as I was like, that's, like, we want the story to end well. We want the movie to end well. We want to like it. We want to enjoy it. But if it doesn't end well, like, let's just be real. Like, we're going to be a little frustrated, right? You're going to get on a stage and tell people how bad the last James Bond, like, you're going to do something, you're going to get online, you're going to talk about it, right? The takeoff on the flight can be wonderful. The actual flight in the air can be great, but if the landing is bad, we're getting online and we're talking about it, right? Like, that, it's the ending very much matters. So much so that I'll tell you a little secret into sermon prep for those of you who've never done this before. Like, I spend a whole lot more time, as you can probably already tell, on the ending than the beginning. Because the beginning comes easy. You come out here, you tell a story, you say something random to get people's attention, but the ending is where we're going. The ending is a lot more important than what we first started talking about, right? How do you go from James Bond to Jesus? Hang on, we're getting there, right? Like, there's an ending that we need to get to. There's a reason why we're going to stand up here and talk for 25 to 30 minutes, because I want you to do something, I want you to hear something, I want you to commit to something. And interestingly enough, throughout this last summer, we've been on a journey going through Jesus' teaching and learning things and listening to him say things and reading the text. And while all summer long, for the last 10 weeks, we've talked about how this is one of the greatest, if not the greatest sermon ever. What if it just flopped here at the ending? What if it just fell flat? Would it have had the impact that it's had? That it's continuing to have? I want to argue that even though this is the greatest sermon ever to be preached, to be taught, I think the way Jesus ends this sermon is so magnificent. Because the last few things he says in this set of teaching on this side of the mountain to this crowd that's been echoed for the last 2,000 of years has such a way to impact you and I. especially for those of us who are following Jesus, for those of us who are Christians, for those of us who have said yes to Jesus and the gospel. The way he ends this message, in my opinion, is so incredible. I don't want you to forget the rest of the things that we've taught, but what he says here at the end is so incredible. And so today, as we conclude this series of the Mount, as we conclude this series that we've been working our way through all summer long through Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, we've learned a lot of things. And unfortunately, we haven't had the time to talk about all the things that Jesus has said. But for the things that we've picked and we've talked about for the last 10 weeks, it's all kind of boiled down to this. Because for the last almost 10 minutes, you guys have listened very well. Or at least you've pretended like you've listened, so kudos to you. But like you've listened very well, but the way Jesus ends this sermon, he's going to encourage us. I would argue he's going to command us that you've got to do more than listen. And so with all that being said, Matthew chapter 7, we're going to start in verse 24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The way Jesus ends this set of teaching is, hey, good job, you guys. You guys on the side of the mountain, right? We've been listening, massive crowd. People have sat down and listened. You've done a great job listening to these words of mine. But if you'll listen to these words of mine, and, everybody say and. If you'll listen and put them into practice. Did you guys know that you're really good at listening? Right? If preachers never told you, let me just tell you, you guys are fantastic. Like, you guys have figured out listening on Sunday morning, right? You wake up, you get your cup of coffee, or you wait to get here to get coffee, whatever your Sunday morning looks like, right? You get yourself together, the family together. You've gotten all of Sunday morning figured out, right? You go the route that you go, you get here, you find the parking spot, you come in, you get donuts or no donuts or coffee or no coffee. You come and find the right seat, the perfect seat. Do y'all sit in the same seat every week? Yes, no, maybe so? Okay, I was just wondering. I don't know. Like, I see y'all, but I don't really see y'all. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not, like, pinpointing where you're at. Whether you come down, you sit, or you take your kids back, you do that whole thing, you kind of get in that rhythm, and you listen to the host, right? Because you got to scan the QR code and do the questions, because if you don't, the Crosswind Church is going to shut down, and no one wants Crosswind Church to shut down, right? You do this whole thing. And then you worship, you sing, you clap, you do all the things, and then you sit down, and then you guys have got this part of the sermon figured out. You listen really well. Like, and at least for almost the last year, like, you guys have done it extremely well. Or at least I think you have, right? You sit and you listen. But is that where you stop? Like, when I pray or the speaker prays and dismiss and everybody goes their own way into the rest of their Sundays and the rest of their week, like, is that where it stops? Like, when you log off the live stream, when you pause the, like, is that where it stops with you? Because Jesus says and. Like, it's great that you listen. It's so respectful, and I really appreciate it. I'm not trying to dog you out. Like, I really appreciate you listening. But like Jesus says, if you'll hear these words of mine and put them into practice. And I just wonder if we're stopping with the listening. Right, because we've been trained, right? If you're like me and you grew up in church, around the church, at the church, like that's just what you do, right? You sit down and you listen to the preacher talk, and then eventually at some point you'll leave. And so we've learned how to listen. Like, it's been ingrained in our culture, in our Southern culture, in our Sunday morning culture, whatever you want to call it. Like, that's just what you do. You go to church and you listen. And I've been doing this for 35 and a half years, and I'm real good at listening too. But Jesus says, and. Jesus says, hear these words of mine and put them into practice. Because when you do that, you're like a wise person. Now, I don't know if you know this or not. You probably didn't wake up thinking this, but everybody wants to be wise. Everybody wants to be wise. That's just a no-brainer. And so Jesus says, if you'll listen and do the things I say, you're like a wise person who builds their house on the rock, on a firm foundation. So if you'll do more than just listen on a Sunday morning, if you'll do more than listen to Christian music or worship music, if you'll do more than listen to the podcast with your favorite author, like if you'll do more than listen, if you'll listen and do, if you'll hear these words and practice them, you're like a wise man who built his house on a firm foundation. Now, parents, you can think about it like this way. So yesterday, I needed to mow. And I had a job for the girls that were just hanging around at the house. I was like, so I'm going to go mow, and here's what you guys are going to do, or here's what I'm going to ask you guys to do. So I brought them downstairs, and there was a pile of laundry, clean laundry, on the bed. And I said, I need you to take the clean laundry, and I need you to make, the different piles, mama pile, daddy pile, your sister pile. Make a pile, right? And then once the clothes that are in the dryer, once the dryer gets done, you're going to take those clean clothes, you're going to make another pile, you're going to take the pile, and you're going to make them into smaller piles. Get it? They were all like, yes, we get it. So they listened. Right? They listened. And so I was like, here's what you're going to do. And they listened. I said, okay, I'm going to go mow, and then when I get back, we're going to make sure it's done, right? This is what I need you to do. And so they listened. And so I went and mowed. Now, I don't know how your children act when they are told something by you, but once I got done and walked back inside the house, they were in the living room, which was not where the laundry was, right? And so they were in the living room, and I said, did you get everything done? Did you do what I asked you to do? And they said, yes. Now, parents, at this point in your parenting journey, what do you do when your children say yes that they've done something? Do you accept them at your word? Or do you go and see if they did what you told them to do? Now, you don't have to answer, right? Like you could be parenting option A, which kudos, good for you. But for the rest of us, we are probably like, I'm going to go check. Right? I'm going to go check. And so went downstairs and laundry was done exactly the way that I told them to do it. Not only did they listen, but they did what I told them to do. And as a parent, that makes you proud, doesn't it? As a parent, it makes you pleased. If you're a teacher and you tell your students to do something and they listen and then they do it, right? Wives, when you tell your husband to do something and they don't listen, right? When they listen, and again, there's this feeling that comes with it. Guess what? The same thing goes for God when you listen to Jesus' words and you do them. It pleases your Father. It makes your Heavenly Father smile, just like any parent who would not only tell their kid to do something, but then the kid would also listen and do it all the same. Jesus continues into verse 25. The rain came, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. You don't have to live very long on planet Earth to figure out that natural disasters are going to happen. Not just natural disasters that we think about, weather elements and those kinds of things, but there's also financial disasters, there's health disasters, there's work disasters, there's relational disasters. And the point of the firm foundation is to let you know that regardless of who you are, regardless of the mistakes you've made, regardless of your education, regardless of your experience, regardless of your last name or what kind of car you drive, life is going to happen. Jesus says it very clearly, and for some reason, for the last 2,000 years, it seems like church hasn't grasped this idea. But in John 16:33, Jesus clearly says, in this world, you will have trouble. in this world, you're going to have trouble. Doesn't matter if you're saved or not. Doesn't really matter where your eternity is set or not. You're going to have trouble. And there's something about us as Christians who are very good listeners. But could it be we just haven't gravitated to the other side of being very good doers yet? But Jesus says, if you'll listen and you'll do the things that I've told you to do, he compares you to a wise person that would build their house on a firm foundation, that no matter what kind of storm came, a real storm, a financial storm, storm within the marriage, storm within the home, the storms of middle school and high school and the upcoming college years, the storms that bring upon ourselves when divorce happens and the bad doctor's report hits or a tragedy strikes. When the storms come, because they are coming, if you'll not only listen to what I say, if you'll do what I tell you to do, your life, your faith, will be like the wise person that builds their house on a firm foundation. But he doesn't stop there. The very last thing that he says in this set of teaching, verses 26 and 27, but everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Do you notice how the storms hit both homes? That per Jesus, regardless of what you decide to do as followers, because again, on that mountainside this day, Jesus is speaking to followers. Just like more than likely most of you in the room are following Jesus. And more than likely most, if not all of you followers of Jesus, you're really good at listening. But is that where we're stopping? Is that all that your faith has become, is to listen to a 25, 35-minute message once a week? Notice here that these houses are going to be hit with a storm. And it's all about what kind of foundation that you have. And all summer long, that's what we've been trying to communicate to you. Again, whether you've been in the room, whether you've watched online, whether you've been out on vacation, out on the weekend, is that, hey, God has not taken up Bible space for this incredible message so that once again that you would just listen to it, or that you would just read it, or that you would just see it, or that you would make a check on your Sunday morning attendance. No. Jesus says if you'll do these things, hear these words and put them into practice, when life happens tomorrow, this week, in the school year, in October, whatever comes your way, if you'll listen and do what I've told you to do, your faith, your life, be like that house that's been built on a firm foundation. That it's strong. It's not going anywhere. Despite however many storms, despite the category levels of the storms, it's built on a firm foundation. And interestingly enough, I think that we see from Jesus' own words that firm foundations are found by both listening and doing. And if you would think about your own faith journey, right here in this moment, if you would think about from the moment that you got saved and you received the gospel message and forgiveness and grace and mercy, all that, to where you are right now, like from that point until today, has that been more about listening? Because if it has, more than likely, your foundation has kind of felt a little shaky, a little flaky, right? When the sand comes in and out with the tide, when it shifts with the wind, does that kind of sum up the way your faith has been? Because you've been doing a lot of listening. But today, the way Jesus ends this message is so powerful because he calls us not just to listen to whatever speaker, pastor, preacher, teacher is in front of you, that's on your app, that's somewhere in your devotion. No, it's so much more than listening. At the end of the greatest sermon ever preached, he says, hey, I don't need you to just listen to me. I need you to do what I've told you to do. I don't need you to just listen to me talk about loving and praying for your enemies. I need you to go do it. I don't need you to just listen to me talking about murder and anger and hate. I need you to go not do those things. Right? Like, I need you to not just listen to a good message on prayer and fasting. I need you to go do them. And so at the end of this message, he says, hey, let's compare. Firm foundation, storms come, so be it. A shaky foundation, a loose foundation, a shifting foundation. When a storm hits, there's a great crash. And I don't want that for anybody. I don't think Jesus wanted that for anybody who was in attendance that day. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all four of these gospel accounts that we have of Jesus, within the gospels, they tell us that Jesus had other siblings. Do you know this? That apparently after the whole born in Bethlehem and Mary and Joseph, apparently after Jesus, Joseph and Mary did what married people do and had other children. I just wonder, and this might be the history nerd in me, like I just wonder, we know from the Gospels that his family didn't really believe who he says he was. Like they were kind of like, he might be a little crazy. He might be a little out of his mind. We don't really know a whole lot about them in the gospel writings, but eventually, somewhere along the way, I just wonder if they were at the sermon that day. More than likely they weren't. But if Jesus taught this set of teachings elsewhere, I wonder if his brother James eventually figured it out. We know that eventually at least one of his brothers, maybe two, depending on who you talk to, one of his half-brothers by the name of James realizes that his half-brother Jesus was exactly who he says he was. More than likely, Jesus showed himself to his family after the resurrection. His half-brother James becomes a leader in the Jerusalem church in the first century. We have one of his letters on the back side of your Bibles by the book of James. Creatively titled, I know. But in this letter, if you've never read it as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, hear me. You should start in the Gospels, right? Because when you read the Bible, you start with Jesus, not Genesis. But sometime after the Gospels, you need to hit up James. Because he writes a very practical letter for Jesus followers. And in this letter, he says something almost identical to what his half-brother Jesus, the Messiah, the Lord, his King, says. And so it makes me wonder, again, nerd out over some of this Bible stuff. I just wonder, like, was he there that day? Like, did he hear Jesus in this sermon? Did Jesus tell him this at the dining room table one day, trying to convince him to follow him? And James is like, I'm not into all that. Did it finally click after he showed up in his resurrected body, showing him the holes in his hand and the holes in his feet? And he's like, hey, man, I'm legit. I don't know the timeline, but eventually James figures it out, and he believes that his half-brother This Jesus of Nazareth is the Christ, is the Lord, is his King. And in the book of James, the first chapter, in verse 22, if you hear nothing else I say this morning, would you listen to the words of Jesus' brother? He says, don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you are only fooling yourselves. The way we've said it numerous times at Crosswind Church, think about it for those of you who have siblings. What would it take for you to believe that one of your siblings was the Son of God? Right? Okay. But somewhere along the way, James begins to believe that this Jesus, that he was raised in the same home with, his older brother, his half-brother Jesus, was exactly who he says he was. Could it be that James began to believe in this resurrected Jesus? I think so. And so later on, decades later, when he's writing a letter to Christians on how to live in very practical ways, he says almost the identical thing to how Jesus ends this magnificent sermon. It's wonderful and it's great and it's courteous and it's respectful to listen. But there comes a point and there comes a time in your faith journey and in my faith journey where we have to not just listen, we also have to do what he says.
Thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us via email at info@crosswindchurch.net and download our free app, I Am Crosswind, to keep up to date on all things Crosswind Church.